Stay outside. This room isn't for you. Why are you doing this? I'm family. No, you're nothing.
Stop. She stays.
She doesn't belong here.
Your father disagreed.
My mother told me to wait outside, at my own grandfather's will reading, not because I wasn't family, but because they thought I was just the help. What they didn't know was, the will wasn't dividing the family, it was exposing them, and every secret they buried about me was about to be read out loud. Olivia Carter was 28 years old when she finally realized something had been wrong her entire life, but the pattern began long before she had the words for it. She stood in the kitchen of her parents' 3-story house in Chicago, the kind of house people admired from the outside. White stone exterior, black framed windows, perfectly trimmed hedges. Inside, everything looked just as polished. Everything except the way she lived in it. Olivia was tall, slender, with dark brown hair she usually tied back in a loose practical knot. Her features were soft but often tense, as if she had learned to hold herself carefully in every room. Her hands, however, told the real story, slightly rough, always busy, always moving. She had a quiet presence, the kind that disappeared easily in a crowded room, not because she lacked confidence, but because she had been trained not to take space. Olivia, her mother's voice cut through the house. Shirley Carter stepped into the kitchen without waiting for a response. She was a sharply dressed woman in her early 50s, always composed, always controlled. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her posture straight, her tone precise. To outsiders, she was elegance. Inside the house, she was efficiency and expectation. "Did you press Ethan's uniform?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes," Olivia said without turning around. "Good. And his protein shake?" "On the counter." Shirley gave a small nod, the kind that acknowledged function, not effort. "Make sure he eats before practice. He has scouts watching this week." Ethan Carter was 24, Olivia's younger brother, and the center of the family's gravity. He was tall, athletic, with a confident, easy smile that came from never having to question his place in the world. Broad shoulders, expensive sneakers, a phone that never left his hand. He moved through life like doors were supposed to open. He walked into the kitchen moments later, grabbing the shake without looking at Olivia. "Mom, where's my white jersey?" he asked. "In your room," Olivia answered before Shirley could speak. Ethan barely nodded. "Cool." That was it. No thank you. No glance. Olivia watched him leave, already halfway out the door, already late for something important. Important to him, not to her. By the time Olivia was 10, she had learned how Ethan liked his breakfast. By 12, she knew how to remove stains from his uniforms. By 15, she had stopped expecting anyone to ask how her day had been. Instead, she worked. At 19, she got a part-time job at a small pharmacy downtown. Late shifts, long hours. The first time she brought home a paycheck, she held it like proof. Proof that something in her life belonged to her. Shirley took it from her hand the same night. "I'll manage this for you," she said. "You're not good with money yet." Olivia didn't argue. She rarely did. Across the house, framed photographs lined the hallway walls. Family vacations, birthdays, holidays. In every single one, Ethan stood front and center, Shirley beside him. Their father, Daniel Carter, just behind, tall, broad-shouldered, a man in his late 50s with graying hair and a commanding presence. Daniel was not loud, but he carried authority in the way he stood, the way he looked at people. A self-made businessman, he valued discipline, at least in theory. In practice, that discipline never seemed to apply to Ethan. And Olivia? Sometimes she was in the photos, but never fully. A step behind, half-turned, holding something, serving something, or missing entirely. One photo in particular stayed with her, a summer dinner years ago. Everyone seated at the table laughing. Olivia stood behind them, holding a tray. No one had asked her to sit. No one had noticed she didn't. Back in the present, Olivia wiped down the kitchen counter, her movements automatic. Upstairs, Ethan slammed a door. Outside, a car engine started, and in the quiet that followed, Olivia stood alone in the center of a house that had always had a place for her. Just never a seat. Robert Carter had built his life on precision. At 78, he was still a man people instinctively listened to, not because he raised his voice, but because he never needed to. Tall, lean, with silver hair combed neatly back, Robert carried himself with quiet authority. His eyes were sharp, observant, the kind that missed nothing, even when he appeared to be saying very little. Years of running a successful investment firm had trained him to notice patterns. And in his own family, something about Olivia had begun to feel like a pattern that didn't belong. It started small. A Sunday dinner, Olivia moving between the kitchen and the dining room, refilling glasses before anyone asked. Ethan laughing at something on his phone, feet stretched out under the table. Shirley giving instructions without looking up. Daniel discussing business like the room revolved around him. Robert said nothing that night, but he watched. Olivia was 20 when he first asked her to sit down. She had just brought in a tray, roasted chicken, vegetables, everything plated neatly. She set it down, stepped back, hands already folding into themselves out of habit. "Sit," Robert said. It wasn't loud, but it stopped the room. Olivia hesitated, glancing at Shirley. Her mother didn't respond. "I'm fine," Olivia said softly. Robert didn't look away. That wasn't a question. For a brief second, something unfamiliar crossed Olivia's face. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. Then she slowly pulled out a chair and sat. No one spoke about it afterward, but Robert remembered. He began to notice more. How Olivia ate last. How she stood while others sat. How requests were never phrased as requests when they were directed at her. And how she never once said no. A week later, Robert invited Olivia to lunch. Not the family dining room, not the house. A quiet cafe downtown. Olivia arrived 5 minutes early, wearing simple clothes. Jeans, a neutral sweater, nothing that drew attention. She looked almost out of place sitting across from him, like she had stepped into someone else's life. "You work evenings?" Robert asked. "Yes," she said. "At a pharmacy." He nodded once. "And school?" "I manage." That answer lingered. Robert studied her, not her words, but the way she held them back. After a pause, he asked, "Do you ever get tired?" Olivia smiled automatically. "I'm fine." The same answer. Too fast, too practiced. Robert leaned back slightly, fingers resting on the table. "That wasn't what I asked." For the first time, Olivia didn't respond immediately. She looked down at her hands, then away, then back at him. "I don't think it matters," she said. That was the moment Robert understood. Not just that she was overworked, but that she had been trained to believe it was normal. That night, Robert made a decision. He didn't confront Shirley. He didn't argue with Daniel. He knew better than to challenge a system directly before understanding its structure. Instead, he acted quietly. Olivia's next tuition payment was already covered before the bill arrived. The receipt never passed through Shirley's hands. The account wasn't in Olivia's name, but it wasn't in her parents' control either. He also began writing things down. At first, simple notes, dates, observations, small details. Olivia served dinner, did not sit. Ethan left dishes, Olivia cleaned. Shirley redirected question, Olivia answered for him. It wasn't anger that drove him, it was accuracy. Robert had spent his entire life building systems that made sense. And for the first time, his own family didn't. By the time Robert Carter's health began to decline, the house had changed, but not in the way most people would notice. The polished surfaces remained, the dinners still happened, and Shirley still curated every moment like it belonged in a magazine. But Robert had grown quieter, slower in his movements, his once steady hands now resting longer on the edges of furniture. The doctors called it a gradual decline. Olivia called it something else, an ending that was taking its time. She was there every afternoon, Not because anyone asked her to be, but because she knew no one else would stay long enough. She helped him sit up, adjusted his blankets, brewed tea exactly the way he liked it. Light, no sugar. Her presence was steady, almost invisible. But Robert noticed. He always did. Ethan visited twice in the first month. The first time, he arrived in a fitted sports jacket, checking his phone more than he checked on his grandfather. He stood at the foot of the bed, offering a quick, "Hey, Grandpa," before launching into a story about a potential sponsorship deal. Ethan was 24, still handsome and confident, but there was a restless impatience in him now, a need for validation that had only grown with age. When Robert didn't respond with enthusiasm, Ethan's smile faded. "I've got a meeting," he said 10 minutes later. "I'll come back soon." He didn't. The second visit was shorter. Shirley handled things differently. She didn't stay long either, but she made sure it looked like she did. One afternoon, Olivia walked into the room to find her mother standing near the window, phone raised slightly, capturing a soft angle photo. Robert in the bed. Olivia beside him, adjusting his pillow. The lighting was warm, carefully framed. "Perfect," Shirley murmured, lowering the phone. She was elegant as always. Tailored blouse, subtle makeup, every detail intentional. But there was something sharper in her eyes now. Control, slipping just enough to make her tighten her grip elsewhere. Later that evening, Olivia saw the post online. "Family is everything. Grateful for these moments." Hundreds of likes. Olivia didn't react. As the weeks passed, the house grew quieter. Conversations shortened. Footsteps softened. Even Daniel seemed less present, retreating into his office for hours at a time. Only Olivia remained constant. She read to Robert when he couldn't sleep, sat beside him when the nights stretched too long, listened when his voice dropped low, words becoming harder to hold on to. One evening, as the sun faded into a pale grey sky, Robert reached for her wrist, not urgently, but with intention. "Olivia," he said, his voice thinner now, but still precise. She leaned closer. "I'm here." He studied her face for a long moment, as if committing it to memory. Then slowly, he slipped something into her hand, a small key, brass, worn at the edges. Olivia frowned slightly. "What is this?" Robert didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted, not to the door, not to the room, but somewhere inward, somewhere only he understood. "You'll know," he said finally. That was all. Olivia turned the key over in her palm that night, alone in her room. It wasn't decorative, not symbolic. It had weight, purpose. She considered asking her mother, then dismissed the thought instantly. Instead, she placed it in the small wooden box beside her bed, the one place in the house that felt like it belonged to her. Down the hall, laughter echoed faintly from Ethan's room. A video playing. Something light, something careless. The contrast didn't feel surprising anymore. 3 days before Robert passed, the house was unusually still. No visitors, no calls, just the quiet rhythm of machines and distant footsteps. Olivia sat beside him, her hand resting lightly near his. Not holding, just there. His eyes opened once, briefly, and though he didn't speak again, there was something in that look, something final, not regret, not fear, recognition. The law office sat on the 18th floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago, quiet, polished, and sterile in a way that made every word feel heavier. Olivia arrived early, as usual, standing just outside the conference room while her family gathered inside like they already belonged there. Shirley Carter adjusted the sleeve of her black tailored coat, every detail immaculate as always. Her blonde hair was pinned neatly, her posture flawless. Grief did not soften her, it refined her. She glanced at Olivia only once, her eyes sharp, assessing. "Wait outside," she said calmly. "This is family business." The words were familiar. Too familiar. Olivia didn't argue. She stepped back into the hallway, just far enough to disappear without leaving completely. That had always been her place, close enough to serve, never close enough to stay. Inside the room, Daniel Carter was already seated, his tall frame leaning slightly back in the chair, legs crossed, fingers resting on the armrest. He looked like a man expecting confirmation, not uncertainty. Years of authority had built that posture into him. Ethan dropped into the chair across from him, one leg bouncing lightly, phone in hand. He looked bored, impatient, like the entire moment was an interruption. A voice cut through the quiet. "Miss Carter?" Olivia turned. Mr. Hayes stood at the doorway, one hand resting lightly on the frame. He was a man in his early 60s, average height, lean, with thinning grey hair and rectangular glasses that sat low on his nose. His expression was calm, but there was a firmness beneath it, something that didn't bend easily. "Yes," Olivia answered. He looked past her briefly, then back at her. "You should come inside." Olivia hesitated. "My mother said—" "I'm aware of what your mother said," he replied, not raising his voice. "Your grandfather gave very clear instructions." Inside the room, the air shifted. Shirley's hand tightened slightly around her purse. Daniel straightened in his chair. Ethan finally looked up from his phone. Mr. Hayes stepped aside, giving Olivia space to enter. "She stays," he said simply. The silence that followed wasn't loud, it was precise, the kind of silence that made every person aware that something had just gone off script. Olivia walked in slowly, choosing the seat closest to the end of the table. Not the center, not the head, just a place. Mr. Hayes closed the door behind her. No one spoke. He took his seat at the head of the table, opened a thin leather folder and adjusted his glasses. His movements were measured, deliberate, someone used to controlling the pace of a room. "We will begin," he said. The reading started formally, property descriptions, legal phrasing, small distributions to extended relatives. Nothing unexpected, nothing that explained the tension sitting just beneath the surface. Then Mr. Hayes paused. He reached into the folder and removed a separate envelope, cream-colored, sealed. Olivia's name was written across the front in steady, unmistakable handwriting. Shirley's voice came quickly. "Is that necessary?" Mr. Hayes didn't look at her. "Your father believed it was." Without another word, he broke the seal. The sound was small, but final. He unfolded the letter slowly, smoothing it against the table before beginning to read. "If Olivia is standing in the hallway while this is being read," he began, his voice even, "then I was right about more than I wanted to be." The room went still. Daniel's jaw tightened. Shirley's eyes dropped to the table. Ethan shifted in his chair, a faint frown forming. Mr. Hayes continued, "I have watched that girl spend years serving a family that calls it love. I have watched her stand while others sit, give while others take, and disappear in rooms that should have made space for her." Olivia didn't move, didn't breathe properly, because for the first time in her life, the truth wasn't being hidden, it was being read out loud. Mr. Hayes did not raise his voice after finishing the letter. He simply folded it once, carefully, and placed it beside the file. The room stayed quiet, but it was no longer the same silence. This one carried weight. Then he looked directly at Olivia. "Your grandfather left further instructions," he said. Olivia felt something tighten in her chest. Not fear, not exactly. Something sharper. Anticipation. Mr. Hayes gestured slightly. "The key." Olivia hesitated for half a second before reaching into her bag. The small brass key felt heavier now as she placed it in his hand. Shirley leaned forward immediately. "What is this supposed to be?" Mr. Hayes didn't answer her. Instead, he stood. "We'll need to continue this at Mr. Carter's residence." Daniel's voice came low, controlled. "That won't be necessary." Mr. Hayes met his gaze calmly. "Your father was very clear. That was enough." The Carter house felt different when they walked back in. Not empty, just exposed, like something hidden had already begun surfacing. They moved toward Robert's private study, a room rarely used by anyone else. Dark wood shelves lined the walls, filled with books and old financial records. The air smelled faintly of leather and paper. Olivia had only been inside once. Mr. Hayes stepped toward a large cabinet built into the wall. Your grandfather left instructions regarding a safe. Shirley crossed her arms tightly. This is unnecessary. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching with mild curiosity. What, some old documents? This is getting dramatic. Olivia said nothing. Mr. Hayes slid open the lower panel of the cabinet. Hidden behind it was a small steel safe, discreet, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. He stepped aside slightly. Miss Carter. Olivia moved forward. Her fingers felt cold as she inserted the key. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. She opened the door. Inside was a stack of files, neatly arranged, labeled, not random, prepared. Mr. Hayes removed the top file and opened it on the desk. The first page was simple, a financial summary. Then the second, Olivia's name. Her brows pulled together slightly. The numbers didn't make sense at first, until they did. Deposits, withdrawals, transfers, repeated patterns, her earnings from the pharmacy, logged, then redirected. Shirley stepped closer. What is that? Mr. Hayes didn't look up. Documentation. Daniel moved forward now, his posture no longer relaxed. That doesn't prove anything. Mr. Hayes turned a page. Printed emails. Shirley's name in the sender line. Subject lines clean. Casual. Transfer completed. Use Olivia's account for this one. Ethan needs the payment by Friday. Olivia felt the air shift. Not because she was surprised, because now it had shape. Ethan pushed himself off the wall, frowning. Wait, what is that supposed to mean? Mr. Hayes flipped to another section. This, he said calmly, is where it becomes more relevant. A contract, thicker paper, formal. Olivia's name printed clearly across the top. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning the lines. Investment agreement, ownership structure, equity allocation. Her name, everywhere. Her signature. She stopped. Her expression didn't break, but something inside her did. That's not mine, she said quietly. Mr. Hayes nodded once. No, it isn't. Shirley's voice sharpened. This is ridiculous. That's just paperwork. Forged paperwork, Mr. Hayes corrected. Daniel stepped closer, his voice tightening. You're making accusations. Mr. Hayes closed the file gently. No, he said. I'm reading records your father preserved. The room went still. Ethan looked between them, confusion starting to replace his confidence. So what? What does that even change? Olivia finally looked up, not at the documents, at him, and for the first time, she didn't look like someone standing behind anything. It means, she said, her voice steady, none of this was an accident. The safe remained open behind them, and for the first time in that house, nothing felt hidden anymore. The study felt smaller now, as if the walls had shifted inward under the weight of what had just been uncovered. The safe remained open behind them, its contents no longer hidden, just waiting to be understood. Mr. Hayes didn't rush. He took another file from the stack, thinner than the others, but bound with a dark blue tab. There's one more section your grandfather marked as essential. Olivia stood still, her arms relaxed at her sides, but her focus sharpened. She wasn't reacting the way they expected anymore. That, more than anything, unsettled the room. Mr. Hayes opened the file and turned it toward her. Carter Strategic Holdings, he read. The name meant nothing, until it did. Olivia leaned closer. The documents were clean, structured, official, articles of incorporation, shareholder distribution, asset breakdown. Her name appeared again, not once, repeated, primary owner. She blinked once, slowly. That's not possible, Daniel said immediately, but his voice didn't carry the same certainty it used to. Mr. Hayes adjusted his glasses. It is entirely possible. Your father established this entity 7 years ago. 7 years. Olivia's mind moved quickly now. That was when she had just started working nights, when her income first began to disappear in small, untraceable ways. When he realized, Mr. Hayes continued, that certain financial activities within the family required insulation, Shirley's tone sharpened. Are you implying something illegal? I'm stating something deliberate, he replied calmly. Ethan stepped forward, his usual confidence cracking at the edges. So, what is this? Some shell company? Mr. Hayes shook his head slightly. An investment firm, quietly built, diversified portfolios, real estate, private equity placements. He tapped the page once. Currently valued at approximately $12.4 million. The number didn't land all at once. It settled. Heavy. Real. Olivia didn't speak. Daniel did. That doesn't make sense, he said, his voice tighter now. I've never authorized. You didn't need to, Mr. Hayes cut in gently. You were never the legal owner. The silence that followed was different from before. This one fractured something. Mr. Hayes turned another page. Initial funding sources, he said. Documented contributions. Line after line. Amounts, dates, transfers. Olivia recognized them, not individually, but in pattern. The missing pieces of her own life, her paychecks, her savings, the college fund she never saw. All of it, aggregated, redirected. Invested, Ethan frowned, trying to follow. Wait, so you're saying this was built using, what? Her money? Mr. Hayes didn't soften it. In large part, yes. Ethan laughed once, short, disbelieving. That's insane. Olivia looked at him, and this time, there was no hesitation. No, she said quietly. It's not. Shirley stepped forward now, her composure slipping just enough to show strain. Even if that were true, it doesn't change anything. She didn't build this. She didn't manage it. Mr. Hayes closed the file halfway. Your father anticipated that argument. He reached into the folder and removed a final document, a directive, signed, notarized. Operational control, he said, placing it on the table. Assigned to Olivia Carter, effective immediately upon his passing. Daniel went still. Not angry, not yet, just still. You're saying she owns it, he said slowly. Mr. Hayes met his eyes. I'm saying, he replied, she has always owned it. Ethan took a step back, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, he looked uncertain, not just about the situation, but about himself. So what happens now? He asked. No one answered right away, because for the first time, that answer didn't belong to anyone in that room, except Olivia. She didn't move toward the files, didn't reach for the documents. She simply stood there, her gaze steady, her posture no longer shaped by the room around her. The truth had shifted something fundamental, not in the house, not in the family, in her, and nothing about that could be undone. The shift didn't happen all at once. It began the moment Olivia closed the blue tab file and didn't hand it back. Mr. Hayes watched her carefully, as if measuring something unseen. Miss Carter, he said, his tone even. You have the right to independent counsel. I would strongly recommend it. Olivia nodded once. I will. That answer was simple, but it carried a weight no one in the room had heard from her before. 2 days later, Olivia sat across from Rebecca Langford. Rebecca was in her early 40s, tall, composed, with sharp features and dark hair cut just above her shoulders. Her posture was precise, her tone direct. She was the kind of attorney who didn't waste words or tolerate confusion. Years of corporate litigation had given her a reputation, controlled, strategic, and difficult to intimidate. She studied Olivia for a moment before speaking. You understand what you've been handed, right? Olivia didn't look away. I understand what's been taken. Rebecca allowed the smallest shift in expression. Approval, maybe. Good, she said. Then we'll focus on what you keep. The first action was quiet. Rebecca filed the paperwork. Access controls were reviewed. Accounts were audited. Authority lines were redefined. No confrontation. No announcement. Just changes. By the end of the week, the financial structure that had quietly operated around Olivia for years no longer recognized anyone but her. Daniel found out first. He stood in his office, staring at the screen longer than necessary. His access credentials had been denied. Again. He re-entered them. Slower this time. Same result. His jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice when he called her. "Olivia," he said, his tone controlled. "There seems to be an issue with the accounts." "There isn't," she replied. A pause. "That system was built with my involvement," he said. "No," Olivia answered calmly. "It was built with my name." The silence that followed stretched longer than either of them expected. Shirley handled it differently. She didn't call. She came in person. Standing in the doorway of the kitchen, perfectly composed as always. But there was tension now, visible in the way her hands remained too still. "You're making a mistake," she said. Olivia didn't turn around immediately. She finished placing a glass on the counter, then faced her. "No," she said quietly. "I'm correcting one." Shirley's expression tightened. "You don't understand the consequences of this." Olivia held her gaze. "I think I do." Ethan noticed last. Not because he was unaware, but because for the first time in his life something had changed without him being the center of it. It started small. A declined card. He frowned, tried again. Still declined. Later, in his room, he checked his account only to find the balance wasn't what he expected. He walked into the kitchen, confusion turning quickly into frustration. "What's going on?" he asked. "Why are my transfers blocked?" Olivia was standing by the window. She didn't turn immediately. "Because they're not yours," she said. Ethan laughed once, sharp. "What?" "The money," she continued. "The accounts, the access." She finally looked at him. "All of it stops now." For a second, he didn't respond. Then, "So what? I'm just supposed to figure it out." Olivia didn't soften. "Yes." The word landed harder than anything else that had been said that week, because it was new, because it had never been expected of him. That night, the house felt unfamiliar, not louder, not quieter, just different. For years, everything had revolved around a system Olivia didn't control. Now, that system had shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly, but completely, and for the first time, everyone else was the one adjusting to her. The weight of small responsibilities. He didn't call Olivia, not out of pride, or maybe something closer to understanding. The house changed last, not structurally, but intentionally. Olivia stayed, not because she needed to, because she chose to. She repainted the walls, lighter colors, softer tones. Removed the heavy furniture that had always defined the space, moved the dining table so there was no clear head anymore. Every adjustment was small, but deliberate. She found the old photographs in the hallway, the ones where she stood behind everyone else. She didn't throw them away. She reframed one, hung it in the center, not to remember what it was, but to acknowledge that it had existed. Some mornings, she still woke up early, still moved through the kitchen quietly, still reached for tasks no one had asked her to do. That part didn't disappear overnight. But now, when she noticed it, she stopped, sat down, finished her coffee before standing again. The accounts, the company, the house, they were real, they mattered, but they weren't the thing that changed her. What changed her was simpler. Permission. Not given, taken. And for the first time in her life, Olivia Carter wasn't waiting to be told where she belonged. She already knew. The house didn't fall apart in a single moment. It unraveled slowly, like something that had been held together by habit, not strength. Daniel was the first to try to rebuild it. He chose a neutral place, a quiet diner on the edge of downtown, not his office, not the house. Somewhere he thought control might feel less obvious. When Olivia walked in, he was already seated, posture straight, hands folded neatly on the table. He still looked like a man used to being listened to. Daniel Carter had always carried authority in the way he spoke, measured, confident, never rushed. But there was something different now, not weakness, just resistance meeting something it couldn't move. "You've made your point," he said after she sat down. Olivia didn't respond. We can fix this, he continued. Rebalance things. There's no reason for everything to be in your name. There it was, not an apology, a negotiation. Olivia met his eyes calmly. It was always in my name. Daniel exhaled slowly, as if adjusting strategy. That's not how families work. She stood up, left cash on the table. That's exactly how this one did, she said quietly, and walked out. He didn't follow. Shirley chose a different approach. She wrote. The envelope arrived 3 days later, placed neatly at Olivia's door. The handwriting was unmistakable, precise, controlled, practiced. Inside, the letter was longer than Olivia expected. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't defensive. It was careful. I think I confused your reliability with your role. I let things become uneven because it was easier than changing them. That doesn't make it right. Olivia read it once, then again. There were no excuses in it, which somehow made it harder. She folded the letter slowly and placed it in the same wooden box where she had kept the key. She didn't respond. Not yet. Ethan didn't write. He adapted. Badly, at first. He moved out within weeks, into a small apartment that didn't echo with familiarity. The first time he tried to cook, he burned everything. The second time wasn't much better, but something in him shifted. Without access, without backup, without someone quietly fixing everything behind him, he began to notice things he had never seen before. Bills, time, effort. So now I have to ask you, if you were Olivia, would you forgive a family that only apologized after they lost control? Or would you walk away and never let them have access to you again? If your entire life was built on being useful, would you keep giving or finally choose yourself? And here's the hardest one. Do you believe people like her parents ever truly change? Or do they just change their strategy? Tell me what you would do. Because sometimes the real inheritance isn't money. It's the moment you stop accepting less than you deserve. If this story stayed with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because the next story might hit even closer to home.